why don't we get started, and then if others join us, they can. This is being recorded, so
Yep.
people be aware with any of your comments that if you're linked to posterity, as we say.
For
Um,
better or for worse. Yeah.
so the context is that on Yom Kippur and Kol Nidre night, um, I was sharing some thoughts, and I'll refer back to it again a little bit later in our time together. Um, that I wanted to through the course of the year, I want to suggest a number of ways for all of us to, in a sense, take better care of ourselves and to add meaning, if not even holiness and sacredness, into our lives. The overall project, let's call it, is sacred aging, and a lot of the material that I'll be referring to, and I anticipate there'll be 3 or 4 sessions like today's through the course of the year, um, dealing with various opportunities of adding, like I said, adding meaning, adding support to the process of aging and the situation in which we all find ourselves in Green Valley and at Beth Shalom Temple Center. The way we're starting um, is looking at this idea called and writing an ethical will, and leaving a legacy, an ethical, if you will, an ethical legacy for your family and friends and for the community. So what I want to do is give some background, give some examples, and then kind of get into a give and take a little bit, that you may want to take some notes and write down, if indeed you're accepting what was the thing from Mission Impossible. If here it is, if here it is, Mr. Phelps. If you accept the mission, whatever. Um,
Right.
if you decide that you want to pursue this, somewhat, call it a little bit of an outline that would help if you decide to proceed. Um, Writing an ethical will, in a sense, is actually a very, very old Jewish custom, even though it may not have that name, or that particular terminology. But the thought, or the idea of uh, leaving excuse me, leaving your thoughts. Hi, Marcia. We just
Hi.
got started.
Okay.
The idea of oh, here comes Sue. We'll see which Sue. I'll stop mid sentence.
It's there.
Dum dum.
Dum.
Sue, speak. Sue.
Oh, hi, it's Sunette.
Oh, it's
Oh,
Sunette.
hi.
Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah, I'm at work, so I might not be on here, but
Okay.
I'm going to
Well,
mute. I'm going to mute myself.
and your husband's on his phone, so we're okay. All
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
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 So, uh, so the idea of um, actually putting down in writing, or sharing and giving, in the sense of a blessing, in the sense of a gift, in the sense of a prayer, to share with children, grandchildren, your legacy, does go all the way back to the Bible. You might remember in Genesis chapter 49, near the end of the book of Genesis, Jacob calls all of his sons together, and for one last time, he's on his deathbed, and he gives them not only blessings, or in some cases curses, but he gives them advice on how they should live to be the inheritors of the title of Israel. Jacob, of course, is also Israel in our history. There are those who would look at the entire book of Deuteronomy, Moses' farewell sermon, as his opportunity before he dies to share what he has learned, what he has experienced. It's kind of a long story, but where he tells the people, because it's a new generation. These are not necessarily the people who experienced Egypt, but he gives them the recap, if you will, and he puts everything into a perspective within the context of following God's law in light of these experiences which Moses, which I have had, and which I then shared with the Israelite people on our journey. King David, according to the biblical text, actually gives uh, um, two types of what I'm calling here ethical wills. In the book of Kings, when David speaks to Solomon specifically, his son Solomon, um, uh, he's the choice to succeed him as king. There's a paragraph, but that is summarized in the phrase "v'chazakta v'hayita le'ish," that you will find strength when you are a man. Now, that may have meant in the sense of a warrior. That may have meant in sense of all these masculine characteristics. But Jewish tradition really interprets it that the hayita leish, that you should be more of a mensch. That way is the and they kind of turn it. Um, in the book of Chronicles, David gives his final blessing to not only Solomon but to all of his sons and the generation. We know that that's eventually going to lead to a civil war, but and a split. But David tells them, he admits that he has sinned frequently in his life, and that his hands, the quote is that his hands are dirty, and therefore God will not allow him to finish building the temple, which is his great dream and an ideal in life and goal in life. And so he blesses his sons, and challenges them to be righteous and to be hopeful and to be strong enough to complete the temple on his behalf. So we have those we have those examples all the way that go back to the Bible of the notion of a parent leaving particular instructions or blessings, or telling his own story of what his life has been, the goals, the aspirations, the mistakes, the failures, and encouraging the next generation to take over and do better, if you will. The quote that I have from, it's not really from Talmud, it's more from the codes literature, more the medieval times, is that the ethical will is the document in which one tries to sum up all we have learned in life and what we want for and from our children. So there have been many attempts to collect some of these things, whether they're biblical, whether they're from the Middle Ages. And incidentally, there were both men and women who left some of these sources of literature. I know we have in the Bible, in the library. We have one or two of the collections. The oldest collection that was published in English was actually published in 1927 by the Jewish Publications Society. And then a rabbi by the name of Jack Reamer, working, excuse me, working with some of his colleagues, conservative rabbi, also had more contemporaneous collections and anthologies. They do include some from earlier days, but Reamer's collection that's been updated once or twice since about the 1970s is a nice collection, and I think we have at least one volume of it in the Temple Library. And Reamer's explanation of what an ethical will is all about. He says ethical wills provide windows into our souls, um, and to those who plan on trying to write one, it's not easy coming to terms with our own mortality or expressing our innermost values and making peace with our unfulfilled dreams. Okay. So the suggestion is I want to share with you, pardon me. Something was still caught in my throat from lunch. Um, I'm going to assume that everybody is familiar with the name of Shalom Aleichem, not the song, not
Mhm.
not the legend, but the Yiddish writer Shalom Aleichem. And his ethical will was actually what he wrote as his epitaph that should be written on his tombstone, okay, which is the following. Here lies a plain and simple Jew who wrote in plain and simple prose. He wrote humor for the common folk to help them forget their woes. He scoffed at life and mocked the world. At all its foibles he poked fun. The world went on its merry way and left him stricken and undone. And while his grateful readers laughed, forgetting troubles of their own, midst their applause, God only knows, he wept in secret and alone. So we think of Shalom Aleichem as being this, happy-go-lucky kind of guy, but he actually, like, what's the name of Pagliacci? Who
The sad clown.
the clown, right?
Yes.
Who made everyone else laugh, chuckle, and enjoy life, but inside he was very, very upset and very depressed and silent. Okay.
And of course, that's all in Yiddish, right? His epitaph was in Yiddish.
I don't know if the epitaph actually on the tombstone is in Yiddish or if it's in English.
Last time I checked, I think it was.
Okay.
Must
Oh,
be
yes.
really
Yeah,
big.
that was a translation by his granddaughter.
Oh,
Oh.
okay.
Okay. Right. Okay.
That's good.
All right. I was first brought to starting to collect some of this literature when I at a workshop in 1978 that was sponsored by the United Jewish Appeal. I'm not sure they even still call it the UJA, United Jewish Appeal. But there was a conservative rabbi from Massachusetts named Joel Zeman or Zeiman, who conducted a workshop for younger rabbis, because that was 3 years after I was ordained, and amongst other things, he was introducing us to this body of literature, ethical wills, and I found amongst other notes when I was preparing for this, I found his like a definition, if you will. An ethical will shares the legacy of what you are, the moral direction you have tried to follow, the direction you would like your children and your grandchildren to take. Material possessions come and go, but your personal legacy remains as the most powerful reminder of what you stood for. In a real sense, an ethical will transcends your death. Right? So, many of us spend time by ourselves, with our spouses, with our attorneys, our tax advisors, whatever, talking about the will and testament for all of our material assets. But this is the opportunity and the impetus, if you will, the suggestion that we spend time on the moral possessions that we have and that we want to share as well. Um, so when you look at these different ethical wills, which can be brief, like the Shalom Aleichem thing, or they can go page and page and page and page and page, on and on and on, depending on how verbose the individual is. But historically, there are 4 or 5 themes that we traditionally see, and I'm not necessarily suggesting that you have to incorporate all or any of these, but if you're categorizing them, these are the most um, popular, or the themes that we see the most in the traditional ethical will formulas. First, and again, this gets into well, actually, all of them get into questions that the contemporary Jewish community deals with as well. Um, um, the first is, make sure that you take care of your okay, so let's say that it's the husband who's writing the ethical will. Says to the children, make sure that you take care of mom and take care of each other. Okay, that more than anything else is a consistent theme. Take care of the rest of the family. I've done what I could. Maybe I haven't done it as well as I should. Maybe, but make sure, especially, that you take care of mom and take care of each other, no matter what happens. Family first kind of thing. What we see a lot of frequently, and again, I leave this open to people to interpret and follow up however you'd like, is, again, if it's the husband writing to his wife and his children, is more frequently than you might expect, the husband says to the wife, I want you to be happy. So if another guy comes along, you have my permission to get married.
Oh my.
Right?
Sure.
Okay. Now, coincidentally, we don't see that kind of statement quite as often when it's the wife who's writing. But I don't know what we derive from that. But and it just pointed out in those who collect all this literature. But again, so take care of mom to the children, and to the children, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself and take care of your siblings. Maintain the family. The second most prevalent, call it what you will, the instruction, a request, or whatever, is to marry within the faith. Now, again, that may not be something that as many of the Jewish population in the contemporary world would include, given realities of our society and our age. But historically, and by historically, I'm not talking about going all the way back to the Bible. I'm talking about in the last 200-300 years. In the collections that we have, marry within the faith is very, very important. The third most prevalent theme is, let's generally call it tzedakah, is charity, although that's not the best translation for tzedakah. Support the community. Give when asked. Help others. There's a quote: "That which you give away is your only permanent possession, because that affects the kind of person that you are." They quote all the Maimonides things about the ladder of charity and giving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the third most important and continuing theme in these collections of ethical will, and the legacy that we want to leave is tzedakah, is giving and sharing. And I'll come back and talk about that in a few minutes. The fourth is support Israel. Support Israel. Now, not just the Jewish people, but since has been a state, to support the state specifically. Again, I'm gonna come back to that too. But there one of the ethical wills that I was looking at, I think the fellow's name was Abramovitz, um, and this quote stood out to me. There is where he's saying, and he's saying to his children, to support Israel. There is no conflict between your obligation as a citizen of America and your love for Israel. On the contrary, a good Jew is a better American. A good Jew is a better American. I thought that was a very interesting thing. And then, and I pulled this one out, this long quote, specifically because it related to the sermon that I gave on Kol Nidre night, and that is that there's a generalized theme not only of maintaining Jewish identity, but specifically, very specifically, say Kaddish. Okay, and I wish I would have found this in time to include it in my sermon on Kol Nidre. But this is, again, and this is from William Abramovitz. Say Kaddish after me, not for me. Kaddish is the unique Jewish link that binds the generations of Israel. The grave doesn't hear the Kaddish prayer, but the speaker does, and its words will echo in your heart. The only immortality I seek is that my children and my children's children be good Jews, and thereby they will be good people. So, if nothing else, say Kaddish as an example, as an expression of maintaining the Jewishness for your sake, not for my sake, but for your sake, because that's the gift, that's the legacy that I wish to give to you. Okay. Personal experience here. When I was working with congregations in which there were many, and then more young people, not so much like in Beth Shalom Temple Center in Green Valley. And when we'd have, there were years when I could have as many as 50 bar and bat mitzvah kids each year. And I would sit and I would talk with each one and meet and spend time with the family and whatever. But I used to have a private conversation with the kids, and then I would do a follow-up with the parents, either individually or collectively, as all the parents of the 2001 bar mitzvah class, whatever it might be. But when I met with the kids and we would talk about their Torah portion, we would talk about what I used to call their mitzvah project, and writing their Devar Torah, their little bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah speech, and because I told them that bless you, I told them that in a sense, every Jew as a teacher has something to teach, okay, and even a 13-year-old has something to teach that will be challenging or inspiring or motivating to the rest of the congregation and the community. But I would ask them, we would talk about their name, especially their Hebrew name, because most of them didn't use their Hebrew name that much. But I would say, do you know who you're named after, and why your parents chose that name? And frequently they knew their name. Many sometimes they didn't know the Hebrew name, but we had to research it. But um, uh, most often they didn't know why the parents had chosen. Oh, I think that was my great grandmother's name or something like that. But they didn't know anything about great grandmother. And so I would make it a challenge to the kids that, okay, by the next time that you come in to see me, I want you to know, three more lines of your Torah portion, but also I want you to find out more information about great grandmother. Um, the children may know. This is the way we expressed it. I expressed it to the parents. Your children know who you are, okay, but their children may not know much about you, and they certainly won't know much about your parents and going back with other generations. So have some kind of a, whether this goes in the ethical will or whether it's just a conversation around the dinner table, that we would suggest to the families is talk about those members of the family who are no longer involved, either no longer alive or no longer living in the same community. Um, and we want the kids to know about them. What was so important about great grandmother that you chose to name your daughter Hannah after the great grandmother? Why did you choose that? She had a couple of great grandmothers. Why did you choose this one? What was she like? What was important to her? What do you remember about her? What did she give candy to everybody? What did she sew? Did she, whatever it might be. And so I wanted the kids to know, and then by extension, the parents to know what was it that you felt so important and so worth remembering about the person whom you chose to include in the next generation's name and life, if you will. So those are some of the background things that I wanted to share about this ethical will, the idea, the concept, some of the a few examples, and I've got one or two more that at the conclusion that I'll get to. But here's where I wanted to, and we can make this a little bit of give and take, if you will. Um, so here's a little bit of an outline. I'm not going to screen share it or whatever. You can make whatever notes that you want to. If you want to follow a particular type of outline and think of the experiment or even the project of writing an ethical will. Um, Obviously, who first would be who you're writing it to. Is this to one particular person? Is this to all of your children, all of the entire family, the grandchildren? Obviously, who are you writing it to, and why? Are you writing it to that person specifically because that you think that he or she is the one who will best maintain your memory and always be keeping, as we say, in the forefront of their eyes, in the forefront of their lives, that all of these lessons and ideas and blessings, that this one person will be the one who will maintain it for you and is the best candidate? Or are you identifying one person or maybe a couple of people whom you have a special concern about what's going to happen in their lives? And so you want to give them a little firmer background, a little more support, a little more self-confidence, a little more ammunition by which especially their Jewish identity, could be strengthened. So part number one in the outline is who you're writing it to and why. Obviously, you don't necessarily have to include the why, but you have to answer it for yourself. Um, then the second would be to include, even if you don't think that it's necessary, because ideally this is something that is going to be handed down for a few generations. So some biography. I was born in, my parents' names were, my grandparents were, they came from the so and from such and such a place. I mean, it's not necessarily listing the name of the ship that they came on from East Ellis Island, but a general time frame. If they and they came from Russia, and they came from Romania, and they lived in New York for a few years, and then there was an uncle who had already come and was living in Cleveland, and so the whole family moved to Cleveland. And some of the background that normally isn't part of the regular family stories that you would hear. In my case, I remember we were sitting and trying to figure out why so many people on my father's side of the family, why so many people have a music interest, music talent, vocal ability. The singer, the cantor, there's this, and can we identify how far back the where the music come from? And was that always just something that was a gift, or was it something that someone along the way had to develop a particular skill in music in order to do what? So if there are those kind of stories, you want to include them. Not only the specific names and the background, but also some of the events. If there were particular events that shaped the family history. I mean, sadly, I have a cousin who's um, who married into a family where four of the siblings and sibling spouses, whatever, were all killed on 9/11. And obviously that brought a certain to a certain degree, that brought a certain time, a stop in part of the family history. But then two of them were able to remarry, and started a whole new branch of the family tree, kind of thing. So it's obviously important to know where that came along. Um, some of us have very strange, if you talk in terms of the image of the family tree, some of the branches kind of intertwine, and this one married a niece, and then there was a second marriage, and whatever, and how did that happen, and Ashkenazi Sephardi, wait a minute, when I start to talk about my background and tell people that I'm not Sephardic, but I'm descended from the Sephardic chief rabbi of Bulgaria in the early 1700s. How did that happen? And at which point did the Sephardic side lose out to the Ashkenazic side? And no one would know that story unless it's written down somewhere. You can look it up on Google or Wikipedia or something like that, but it's not necessarily going to connect to Rabbi Norman Roman in Green Valley, Arizona. And so you need those kinds of things. And incidentally, one of my favorite professors from rabbinic school would be very upset if I didn't say, anytime that you're making any kind of a document like this, feel free to send a copy to the American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati. They collect all of these kinds of things. Okay. Whenever I do a wedding ceremony, I send a copy or I collect them over over maybe 3 months worth, and we send to the all the records to the American Jewish Archives. How many of the weddings are first marriages? How many of them are second marriages? How many of them was there a divorce or a widow situation? How many are college graduates? How many uh, how any of this information, how many people were converted to Judaism, and and whatever. Somebody, because Dr. Marcus of beloved memory would say, somebody in the year 2029 is going to want to do a PhD dissertation on the number of Jewish weddings in the state of Ohio between 1970 and 2000, and they're going to, oh, thank goodness we have the records from Rabbi Roman. So he made us promise. Marcus made us promise that anytime that there's send information to the American Jewish Archives, yeah, I can give you the address and do it. Yes, Steve, please.
I just wanted to say very briefly, and this might sound like a plug, but the most efficient way to share is to keep your family tree on Ancestry and keep telling all the members of your family about it. So
nowadays,
knows,
right.
That
in 1972, when Mark they wouldn't that kind of thing.
No, but today,
right.
that's a
Today,
real.
that's what to do. Sure.
It's advantage, and
Right.
not to disrupt your talk here, but you mentioned epitaphs, which was very interesting. Sometimes that could be a very succinct summation, and they're not always. I guess we have an idea that, of course, this is a very serious thing, and we're taking it seriously, obviously, but sometimes these epitaphs that are very meaningful are pretty humorous.
Oh, yes.
And sound and
Definitely.
sound pretty trite, but when you think about them a little bit, they're actually very deep and say a lot. And I have just one I wanted to share.
They can also be sometimes very sardonic.
Yeah.
I got my last word is going to be.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, and anyway, I have one this is from a member of the tribe. His name is Harvey Picard. I talked about him at our last men's club meeting. He was a graphic novelist, very interesting guy. And, they actually made a movie about him, American Splendor. But anyway, his epitaph was a very small gravestone, very short. Okay. He said, life is about women getting gigs and being creative. And that's it. And actually, we might laugh or we might think that that's a little, but, it kind of says a lot. And also, some of us, it means a lot also to maybe not take yourself too seriously.
Right.
I think, personally, if I were, writing an ethical, I think part of it would be, I ran into trouble when I started taking myself too seriously. And you have to remember that. I remember my dad used to always say that life is just, he used to sing it actually, or try to sing it. Life is just a bowl of cherries. Don't take it serious.
Right.
So when I got, overly emotional about things.
Okay.
So that's what he would say. Yeah.
Okay. Right. But those are the things that we should remember. And right. Okay. So where I was to include in this outline, to include not only the biographical stuff, but also certain events that helped shape your family and your life, to include, and it's certainly appropriate to do so, whether it's by name or just in a guarded reference, the people who influenced your life. Favorite teacher, your rabbi, whoever it might be, and not only the people who, but certain events or certain opportunities or certain momentous momentous occasions that had long-term impact on your life and on the decisions that the decisions that you made. That I think all of us can think back to different interactions with people, and like we made a promise as a result, we took a vow as a result of this particular interaction. Again, I don't have to remind you of biblical stories like that, of the Jacob dreaming of the angels going up and down the ladder, and he says, God's in this place, and my vow is that I will always have God in my life, if God will protect me, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, then four, maybe we're getting a little more specific now, again, into the Jewish legacy. So the fourth point on the outline that we talk about is which Jewish ritual, and they don't have to be Jewish, they could be American cultural, whatever, but which rituals resonate with you the most, that you would want you would want your kids, grandchildren, whatever, to model, to emulate, to continue on your behalf. Grandma always lit Friday night candles, whatever it was, and that kind of thing. There's some great little, I don't know if you've seen them. There's some great little short documentary things that people have done. Some of these young filmmakers and whatever, talking to their bubbies in their 80s, and whatever. What do you remember from your bubby in your Zadie? And there's one that talks about that. This is one of my favorites. Is one who talks about this woman who says, my grandmother was famous for her meatloaf, right? Anybody ever remember seeing this documentary? My grandmother was famous for her meatloaf, but we could never understand why before she served it, she always cut off one quarter of it, so that it looked as if something was missing. Grandma, why'd you do that? I don't know. That's the way my mother always did it. She always cut it off, and it turns out that the background was that the great grandmother, whatever, her oven wasn't big enough for the entire loaf of the meatloaf, so she always had to cut some off, and that's what the grandmother remembered from great grandmother's meatloaf recipe, of always cutting off one end, and it got passed down, it got passed down, it got passed down. So there are those kinds of things, whether it's a ritual, whether it's a particular story, a Jewish story, a biblical story, whether it's a particular quote, whether it's a particular personage, a character. When I meet with a family in anticipation of writing a eulogy before a funeral, I always ask the family, did so and so have a favorite Jewish character, or a favorite Jewish song, or a particular ritual, or a holiday, a custom, or something. And then if they did, I try to make sure that I include that, if not even build off of that as a major point in the eulogy. That leads into not only a favorite Jewish character or quote or story, but any kind of anecdote, any kind of illustration that that you remember, or that you want to be remembered by. Here is something that I accomplished that people may not know about, or here is something of which I feel extremely proud, and I want my family to remember this always. If there's a particular an illustration, a particular moment, or specific accomplishment. There's nothing wrong with being extraordinarily proud of things that we have done, and we want to make sure that again that future generations know that that I just had uh, the opportunity. There are many side stories to this, but when I was growing up, and this ties together a couple things that I was saying before. So when I was a kid, um, the my family already in Cleveland, in the Jewish community, was known for participation in music. An uncle after whom I was born was the after whom I was named. He died in World War II, died in Normandy, but he had been a cantor. My father was the music director of the temple. Another uncle was a soloist. Another uncle was a music teacher. Another cousin sang in traveling Broadway shows. Another uncle was the music. He didn't sing, but he was the conductor of orchestras and things. So everybody in Cleveland and the Cleveland Jewish community knew of the Roman family involved in Jewish music. And this is now I'm talking in the 1950s. 1957, the temple that we belonged to built a new building out in the suburbs. They moved from the downtown out into the suburbs, built a huge, glorious, glorious building. Those were the days of what we called the Jewish edifice complex. Um, the and because my uncle, after whom I was named, had been the cantor of that congregation years before. So even as a kid, I think I was in fourth or fifth grade, I was invited to sing the Kiddush, the Friday night Kiddush, in front of all these thousands of people when the new temple was dedicated, because that was the Roman family connection, the musical connection for the congregation that had stretched over now three generations. Um, so then, what coincidentally jumpstart almost 60 years later, um, the the senior rabbi of that congregation now is one of my former students. Detroit, from my congregation in Detroit. He's now the senior rabbi there, and he invited me in 2017 for the 60th anniversary of the building, and I
Wow.
sang the Kiddush again. And there were people who actually came up to me and said we were there the first time. Matter of fact, there was one person who came. He must have been close to 100. One person who came and said, "I remember hearing your uncle sing the
Oh,
Kiddush in the old building." So that's the kind of story. I'm extremely proud of it and of that connection. It's the kind of anecdote that needs to be written down and shared as we go. So there, and especially when they relate to family history and they relate to our connection to the Jewish world and synagogue life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then usually the um, the ethical will, traditionally, in the outline that I'm talking about, usually also ends with my fervent wishes, or my prayers for you, or my blessing for you. I referred to like Jacob blessing his children. Oh, may God bless you with such and such, or it is my wish that you will add blessings to your family, your community, to the Jewish people by doing such and such. Again, so like the 6 point outline: um, who are you writing to? Give the biography. What are some of the major events that have shaped your family's experience? Who were some of the people that strongly influenced you, or what were some of those? We talked about events that helped shape, whether it's the family or whether it's my own individual life. Which Jewish rituals have the most meaning for you? So, like in light of that story I was just telling, every time that I sing Kiddush, even 2024, even if if there are just 10 or 12 people standing around or in our own home, I still do a flashback to to that first time that I was in front of a crowd, singing Kiddush in 1957. And then what other anecdotes or illustrations do you want to include, and then blessings. um, so I want to kind of bring this to a conclusion with the following. I do have I do have a personal connection here also, and this is one that's said with a certain amount of pride. Some of you might remember the name of a of a comedian, but he wasn't like a stand-up comedian. He was more of a writer, and he was interviewed a lot on radio and early days of television, whatever. But there's a fellow by the name of Sam Levinson.
Yeah.
Levinson. Okay, all right. So Sam Levinson was actually distantly, and by marriage related. Okay.
Oh boy.
My um, uh, my first cousins, one of my first cousins, her cousin I'm not on the Roman side, but on the other side, her first cousin was related. If I remember correctly, was a nephew of Sam Levinson, something like that. But I do remember back around the time of my bar mitzvah and whatever that, and my cousin's bar and bat mitzvahs, that he came to some of those events. So I actually got to meet him, and he would be like the MC. Long before we had disc jockeys, right? So he would be the MC for the family simcha, kind of thing, and never got to do Passover with him, which everybody said was a great thing. But I remember meeting him, and I certainly collected a lot of the things that he wrote. He died in 1980, um, and he wrote several things in different collections and different forms that he considered to be ethical wills. When he was interviewed by this Rabbi Jack Reamer, who was collecting things back in the 60s and 70s, and he asked for Sam Levinson's permission to include some of these as examples, and he got the permission and whatever. So there's one that he's famous for, but it really doesn't have the same form of a typical ethical will. But I'm going to share it with you. And then the other one is much more of a in the classic formula. But this one, and again, if you remember anything about Sam Levinson or his type of humor and seichel, good common sense kind of thing. Um, he actually wrote it as kind of like a limerick. It doesn't necessarily rhyme, but a limerick, that he called time-tested beauty tips.
Oh,
Time-tested beauty tips, and he wrote it for some reason, I don't know if it was a script or a gift or whatever, for Audrey Hepburn. And
oh,
so she's the one who has this in her book. So, like in her autobiography, her memoir, and some other things or she did a little TV spot about it, whatever. Um, Sam Levinson's time-tested beauty tips. Okay, all right.
mhm.
So, for attractive lips, speak words of kindness. For lovely eyes, seek out the good in people. For a slim figure, share your food with the hungry. For beautiful hair, let a child run their fingers through it once a day. For poise, walk with the knowledge that you'll never walk alone.
Mm.
Okay? People, even more than things, have to be restored, renewed, revived, reclaimed, and redeemed. So never throw out anybody. Remember, if you ever need a helping hand, you'll find one at the end of your own arm. And as you grow older, you'll discover that you have two hands, one for helping yourself and the other for helping others.
Yeah, okay.
That's
Okay?
beautiful.
I
You
love
have
it.
a copy
Isn't that nice?
I
Okay.
love it.
Like I said, it's
Mhm.
not in the typical form of
Yeah.
an ethical will, but it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, Marcia, what?
Could you send us a copy of it sometime? It's very
Sure.
good to
Yeah, some of
remember
these things.
something
Yeah,
like that.
I'll have them typed up, and they'll be available. If you try to send me a tickle reminder, send me Rabbi, please send me a copy of Sam Levinson's thing.
Mhm.
I can do that. Yeah. Okay. All
Mhm.
right. Then
Thank
this
you.
is the one that he actually called um, uh, to my grandchildren and to children everywhere.
Mm.
And I've been quoting this one. I don't know. Like I said, ever since the early '70s, since I was first introduced to the notion of the ethical will. So Sam Levinson, I leave you my unpaid debts. They are my greatest assets. Everything I own, I owe, colon. One, I owe to America. I owe a debt for the opportunity it gave me to be free and to be me. Two, to my parents, I owe America. They gave it to me and I leave it to you. Take good care of it. Three, to the Jewish tradition, I owe the belief that man does not live by bread alone, nor does he live alone at all. This is also the democratic tradition, so preserve it. Four, to the 6 million of my people and to the 30 million other humans who died because of man's inhumanity to man, I owe a vow that it must never happen again. Five, I leave you not everything I never had, but everything I did have in my lifetime: a good family, respect for learning, compassion for my fellow man, and some four-letter words for all occasions. Words like help, give, care, feel, and love. Grandpa Sam.
Thank you.
So,
That's cool.
so there's my introduction to all of you, those who are with us today and those who will be watching on the recording. There's an introduction to ethical wills, and I hope that you might follow up on the idea of writing one. Like I said, if you do, feel free to send it on to the American Jewish Archives.
Mhm.
Fill in the information that Steve's talking about, like on Ancestry. Um, and and later on in the year, there'll be a couple other opportunities to share some more aspects of this sacred aging, which is a project that has been really strengthened by the work of one of my friends and colleagues, Rabbi Richard Address, who's
Oh, yeah.
based in Philadelphia. Richie Address, I
Has
think.
a podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you and Sunette know him. Yeah, he's almost he winters in Florida, but he's based in the Philadelphia area, And this has been his project primarily for about the last 10, 15 years.
No,
So,
yeah,
hopefully we'll
okay.
follow up on things that he suggests that we do. Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
no, it just, it also coming to mind for some of us, it's a little bit hard to put pen to paper, and it
No
may be
question.
easier to just do a videotape, which
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
even for posterity,
Absolutely.
that might even be something that, children, grandchildren might like to watch. Reading something that people wrote is one thing, but actually seeing them and hearing
Right.
them talk
And we
is
have the
another.
and we have the easy, it's easy to do that these days.
You know,
Right.
absolutely.
I mean, I would love to know what my great grandfather looked like. Kind of thing.
Mm.
So, all right. And Marcia, yeah, I will get some of these typed up and make them available. Just send me a reminder,
Thank you.
okay? Or leave a message. Okay,
And of
everyone.
course, this Zoom was recorded, so.
This was recorded. This was recorded. Right. Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very
Thank you.
much.